Welcome to the 4 Bars Podcast. I'm Ken Leith.
And I'm Patty Leith. We are your hosts for some compelling dialogue, encouraging our listeners to strengthen their connections
And build strong communities, lifting each other up and connecting in ways that matter.
We named the podcast 4 Bars as a reference to how hard we work to find a 4 Bars connection on our devices.
And we wondered what could happen with relationships if we worked as hard at connecting.
Let's find out.
Welcome back to the 4 Bars Podcast. I'm your co-host, Ken Leith, along with my co-host.
I'm Patty Leith. Welcome back. It's great to be here today.
And we are welcoming today with us Jessica Turner.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
I'm excited.
We're going to have good conversations today. Today, we're going to be exploring holiday life and relationships and how do we make connections during that and how does that impact us on a regular basis? So I think that's something we're going to really get in. But first, I'd like to know a little bit, Jessica, about your background. Share that with the audience, if you would.
Sure, yeah. As we said, I'm a licensed therapist. I practice here locally in Rogers, Arkansas, so just down the street from Bentonville. And I have been practicing for 9 years. I think that sounds like such a big number to say. I work in individual settings, so one-on-one therapy, mostly with adults. And I specialize in trauma. So I work with a lot of complex PTSD, people healing from like childhood traumas. I love what I do. It's really rewarding.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I met Jessica because she teaches a self-care Sunday at one of the places where I'm a member, and I love going and just taking a couple of hours or an hour and a half on a Sunday morning and saying, hey, let's just think and be present. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and having heard a little bit about that, one of my thoughts was kind of what was your inspiration to create Self-Care Sundays?
I do all my best thinking like late at night when I'm supposed to be going to bed. And so just one night I had just an aha moment of, I think because I was thinking about the programming at Lake Street. And they do so many great events around all sorts of different topics, but a lot of themes around Lake Street are, wellness and taking care of yourself in various ways. So I was thinking about how can I bring what I do into a space like that? Because I felt like, inherently my values match a lot of the Blake Street values, and therapy kind of matches a lot of the Blake Street values. And so I just was thinking about dedicating a time once a month, one Sunday a month for an hour or so, just having like a time you can put on your calendar of I'm going to focus on taking care of myself. We get so caught up in life day to day, and it's much easier to focus on other people's needs and take care of other people. And we don't often take that time for ourselves. And so I live and die by my calendar. So if it's on the calendar, I'm going to do it. Yeah. And so it's like, this is a good way to, bring in some time to just focus on the self.
Yeah.
And so every month we pick a different type of self-care, whether it's, recreational, spiritual, physical, and we just focus on a different element of, self-care, wellness. Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons we don't self-care is we say, hey, we don't have time.
Exactly.
And so when I put this on my calendar, I'm really careful to not say to myself, oh, I don't have time to do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole point of it.
Absolutely. That's a great. I talk to clients all the time, especially when we are under times of stress. Self-care is the first thing to go, because there is that idea of, oh, well, I don't have time for this. This is something frivolous. This is something I don't need, but it really should be foundational. I talk to people all the time about kind of the classic therapy metaphor is, when you're on an airplane and then something goes wrong, or the safety demo, they tell you that, something goes wrong, the oxygen masks will fall, and to put your own mask on first. And so we really have to put that, or apply that rather to our own lives. And you got to put your own mask on first. You got to take care of yourself before you can effectively take care of other people.
Yeah. So good points.
Absolutely. I think about that part too, where you got to take care of yourself. And now we're thinking about the holidays. We hear often that that's one of the things that gets sacrificed on the holidays. Can you expand a little bit about what do you think about that particular area?
Yeah, sure. And I think, the holidays are such a hustle bustle sort of time often. We've got all sorts of parties and work events and family events. And I think we just get so overwhelmed. I remember last December, there wasn't a day for like a 2-week stretch where I had nothing on the calendar.
Yeah.
It was just, for whatever reason, all the events just lined up on that same kind of 2-week. And so weekdays included. And so I remember being like, I don't have a second to just sit on my couch. And so going back to that idea of like, oh, well, I don't have time to take care of myself. I've got something every single day. So like, I don't have time for me. And so I think, especially because the holidays, you know, they're focused around a lot of times like giving. And so with that, there's this sense that, well, I have to give everything I have to other people. You know, taking time for myself is selfish. I hear that a lot. Well, if I do something for myself and I say no to this person, I'm being selfish. I'm like, well, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Like, why is selfish a bad thing? We've become to know it as a negative thing, but it's not selfish to take care of yourself. And even if it were, if that's selfish, do it. Be selfish.
Be selfish.
Be selfish.
Make some progress in life.
Exactly. Set yourself up for success so that you can be more productive and effective in these other areas.
And hopefully happier too, because it seems like when we start sacrificing something that we're not doing, and maybe not overtly, but maybe in the back, it's like, oh, wow, I'm having to go do this. And so you're not going to have the full level of what I would call satisfaction out of that.
Right.
Because you're thinking, I'm missing out on my workout. I'm missing out on these other things I should be doing, things of that nature.
Absolutely. There has to be a mindset switch before there can really be a behavior switch. Because we have to start thinking of rest and that self-care time as a productive thing. You know, we think of, oh, if I'm going to spend the morning doing nothing, if I'm going to spend the morning, you know, just taking time for me, we think of that as lazy.
We do.
And so then as you're, you know, you could be laying on the couch, taking some much needed time for yourself. And or like you said, you're thinking about all these things that you should be doing. So then that rest is not productive. Something I tell people a lot is, you know, when your phone dies, when the battery dies, you can't keep going. You have to put it on the charger before it'll work anymore.
It's true.
But our batteries die and we just keep going. And so you have to put yourself on the charger sometimes, whatever that looks like for you. For some people, that's sitting on the couch and binging some TV. For some people, that's going outside. And like, I love to go be in the mountains where there's no people whenever I need to recharge. And that's great for me. But it really is whatever works for you. But like I said, there has to be that like mental shift first.
Yeah, to take time
to be able
it.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing wrong with it.
Exactly.
I remember I've gotten better about taking my time, but earlier in life, and still sometimes I'm go. And I remember a friend coming over one Sunday afternoon when I had decided that I was way overdue for a charge, and being embarrassed because I really wasn't doing anything. I hadn't put on any makeup. And she's like, oh, it's good to see that you're joining the rest of the world. And like, taking some downtime. And I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I should do more of that.
You were going above and beyond thinking it was normal. And these other people are like, Patty is doing the most.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But it can be very transformational. 1 year, we did something we've never thought of doing. And it was right up, coming up to Christmas. And it's just like we had been going, that cycle for work for a long time. And then, you know, throw in the holidays on top of it. And probably, I don't know, maybe it was like maybe around the 10th of the month. It's like, oh, we just need a break. And we weren't going to be traveling that year to go see our children who were in Colorado and stuff. But what we decided to do at the last minute was like, where could we go that we could get to and from whenever, you know, as far as there and back at a reasonable length of travel and was cost effective. So we ended up going to Jamaica and on a spur of the moment kind of scenario. Again, we planned it maybe with a week's notice. Went there and we returned on Christmas Eve.
Amazing.
And
it was pretty epic.
It was pretty chilled and relaxed when we got back. And, you know, during that time, you know, the typical thing, we've been at home doing our hustle and bustle, which we all probably enjoy to a degree. And because I know I do it, but create that stressors. So they start to add up. Here we were horseback riding, you know, we were walking up falls, we were just out in the water and the kayaking and just doing all this stuff and not having to think about it and just meeting other people who are there kind of for the same reason, I think.
Probably the same reason.
Well, and when he had suggested it, I was like, all these things that haven't been done yet, right, for Christmas. And I have to do them all. Where I have to do them all. And it turned out it really was okay not to do some of them, and we could do some of them from where we were. But it was an interesting kind of take on the holidays. And when I said yes, I felt like the main characters in Christmas with the Cranks.
I was literally, as you were describing, I was like, it's like Christmas with the Cranks.
Yeah.
But without the rushing home to deal with the kids.
Or all of a sudden, because frankly, if they had decided to come home, we would have been out of luck. Yeah. Yeah. So.
But that would have been great too. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I was gonna say, I think you bring up a good point about all these things you have to do.
Yeah.
Says who?
Yeah.
Says anything to who?
Right.
Yeah. I think that the who, that's always a really interesting thing. We had a little bit of a conversation about it. It's kind of, I think it's children in our country, and this could be everywhere, but I don't necessarily think it is everywhere. But there's a certain amount that gets ingrained to us from the commercial side. The imagery of whether it's the many Christmas movies since our childhood that we've seen, Hallmark cards, then holiday letters and the stuff that come out. There's a certain expectation of that life.
Yep.
And for some people they will remember some, but it's almost like that. It's a Wonderful Life kind of scenario where it's got to be this
idealistic sort of.
What do you think drives those expectations of ourselves for many of us? And there's probably more than one thing.
Sure. I think you're right. I think a big part of it is just this kind of societal expectation of what that should look like. And I think from that, if you look at it, because if you watch these, it's maybe not It's a Wonderful Life, because it's not very wonderful for so much of it. I watched that movie for the first time and I was like, this is the saddest thing ever.
It's pretty sad.
Very true.
A misnomer. It's not wonderful. But a lot of these Christmas movies, or when you think about the idea of the holidays or the idea of Christmas, there's just this sense of joy, right? This sense of happiness. This is what it's supposed to, these are the feelings it's supposed to bring out in you.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want that?
Yes.
Right. And so we all want that sense of happiness and joy and connection. I think the problem is when we are going based on kind of those societal expectations and not necessarily checking in with, does this work for me? Right? You're trying to attain something that may not even be good for you or may not be realistic for you. We just have this sense of, well, this is what it's supposed to look like. Right. And this, if I do this thing, it's going to bring me joy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And so if I go to all these Christmas or holiday parties, it's going to make me happy because that's what you're supposed to do.
And if it doesn't make me happy, what's wrong with me?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. There's something wrong with me. Maybe it's just that you're an introvert and going to all these holiday parties is draining.
Yeah.
That's
simple, right?
That's okay.
Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. I'm the person that's like, oh, another party? Yes, I get energy from that.
He is more, and we're both pretty outgoing.
Yes,
but you get a lot more energy after a day with a lot of people by going out than I do.
Yeah,
sure. I always joke that there's golden retrievers in the world and then there's cats. I love cats. And so a lot of golden retriever activities make me very exhausted. And I can, I like to do those things from time to time. I always say I'm like an extroverted introvert. I need that socialization from time to time, but it wears me out. And so I have to go be a cat and go be by myself and hiss at people and just be grumpy for a while after lots of golden retriever activities.
And I'm similar. We have a tool that we use in our work where we help people collaborate. And one of the things is whether or not a person prefers to vet their ideas and build them from 0 to 60 internally or externally. And I actually do that externally. So my thinking, walk with me on this.
Sure.
Let's think out loud together. And yet a lot of my personality testing over the years, I'll come in with a little bit of introversion and, the recommendation always is take a little cave time, right? And so I do that. I get up before anybody else. I sit on the couch with my puppy and a cup of coffee and a good book. And then I can kind of recharge, but he doesn't need that. And so he's more extroverted and has that external need to process. So
it's very interesting.
Oh, the battery's always.
So I'm more like you, extroverted introvert. When I was younger, I feel like I was shy, and I don't feel shy today, but that's probably learned over the years.
I think that's a good point because we can shift, and we typically do shift. And even, based on the stressors you have in life, like you may, whether it's for better or worse, but you may withdraw a little more whenever in a time of stress, or you may be reaching out to others more when you're in a time of stress.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's in a healthy way, sometimes not so much. But yeah, our needs shift depending on what's happening in our lives. And so I think it's important to just constantly be checking in with yourself and asking yourself, is this actually like serving a purpose that's good for me?
Yeah. And I think for many, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, but for many people, we do have a tendency to detach a little more during stress.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good or bad? And what can you do about it? Does it depend on the person?
I think it depends on the person. And that's always the most annoying answer.
Yeah. No, but
It
I get
so
it.
many, especially when we're dealing with like psychology and the human mind, it is so like person dependent. I can say I tend to withdraw socially in times of stress, and it's not always super healthy for me. Because I think the reason it's person dependent is because we have to ask ourselves, what am I doing this to avoid, or am I doing this to, we have
to recharge.
Exactly. We have to assess our intentions.
Oh, that's good.
And that's not always easy to do, because sometimes we lose that like self-awareness because we're in a time of stress. And so, because I know what I'm doing and I'm trying to just detach from the world, and it's not always a great thing, because I'm not always actually spending that time productively recharging. Sometimes I'm just like in a hole.
That makes sense. Are there any methodologies that people can do and think about during the holiday season that helps them realize, there are some things going on within me and I need to kind of evaluate that?
So I think always having a baseline is really helpful. So it's one of the first things I typically talk to clients about when they're new and they come into the office is, let's establish some sort of baseline for where you are just kind of day to day. So whether that's by like tracking your mood, there's tons of apps that you can use for that these days, where it's just you pick the smiley face that matches how you're feeling, that sort of thing. And it can be something that simple, because we have to increase our awareness of ourselves. A lot of times we're just kind of going through the motions day to day, and you're not taking that time to really check in. So you may not even really know what is normal for you, right? We've never actually taken the time to assess, like, where is my mood day to day? Because if you're more aware of that, you're going to, you're actively monitoring, right? And so by doing that, you're going to be more mindful of whenever that starts to shift, because you're taking that action to actually check in. And so I think from there, if you start noticing, okay, there's some shifts happening, and generally I think when those shifts, they tend to be a little more negative, right? And so then you can start pulling in that toolbox of strategies, coping skills, things that you tend to do to de-stress, whether that's connecting with friends or family, or taking that internal time to recharge, whatever that looks like. But I think just having a better sense of where you are day to day, having that baseline is really helpful.
And I think through the holiday, stress is at an all-time high.
Sure.
Copers can be both positive and negative.
Absolutely.
There's probably access to more negative copers during the holidays.
All the treats.
All the treats, the food.
There's so much food.
There's the libations.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah. Can you speak to that, and what are some good checks for us as we experience that stress? Because most of us, I think, can feel our stress level rising. And with that, we feel ourselves doing the things like disconnecting or, so as I'm realizing that, what are some of the good strategies to stay with positive copers rather than negative?
I think something I always recommend to people is like on your notes app on your phone, like pull it out and make a list of all the things that tend to help you whenever you are stressed, things that just make you feel better. And then from there, we can look at, okay, all these things on this list, kind of sussing out whether they're positive or negative. Generally, drinking as a coping skill is not a healthy thing. Right? Generally, smoking cigarettes as a coping skill is not a healthy thing. Right. So there's some easy kind of red flags there that you can look for. But I think anything...
Ice cream at midnight.
Right. I think anything...
It's fun, though.
Anything can be a coping skill. It's so much fun.
Yes.
Like, come on. I always say it's like my dirty raccoon time when I go in the middle of the night in the pantry and I just grab some random snacks that don't go together at all. And I'm just like, this is my dirty raccoon time.
I love that title.
It's not a healthy thing necessarily, but sometimes you have to just do what you got to do.
Sometimes you do.
Sometimes. I think anything, I tell people all the time, I think anything can be a coping skill. It's just a matter of, is this actually working for me, or is this something that, my therapist taught me and it doesn't actually work for me? Because that's okay too. Not everything is going to be super effective. But circling back to that kind of checking in with yourself, a lot of times if you're monitoring your mood day to day and you're kind of keeping track of that, you can also be keeping track of, okay, I tried this deep breathing technique, for example, and I was able to see, oh, it did help. Right. Like my stress levels decreased from that. Or you can see, okay, I tried that deep breathing technique. It didn't really work so much. And then we can explore why that is. Maybe that's just not a great skill for you, or maybe there's something about that method specifically, and then we can reevaluate from there.
One year I did some evaluative work on my own stress, because I that's something I've had to work on my whole life, is just keeping that in control. And one of the things that I realized is that when I was staying well hydrated and eating well and sleeping well, all the indicators of stress were less. Yeah. Right. And so getting into that good routine is also something.
That's a great point. There's something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's a psychological theory that basically says you cannot reach, it's a pyramid that's got different layers. And basically you can't reach the top, which is self-actualization, which is a person reaching their full potential. But according to Maslow, you can't reach that top layer until every layer underneath has been met. And so the very bottom layer is safety and security. And so it's as simple as food, water, warmth, rest. And something I talk to clients constantly about is that rest, because like 80% of the time we can chalk up, a mood situation, whatever, a shift down to like, how's your sleep? Are you getting good, consistent quality sleep? Because if you're not, so much of your day is just trying to keep up, right? You're tired. And so you're focused on how tired you are. You can't make the goal or meet the goals that you want because your basic needs aren't being met.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of this stuff is really, really simple. Sometimes it is just a matter of, what are you eating? Are you eating nutrient-rich food that is actually giving your body the power that it needs to do what it needs to do, right? What's your sleep look like?
Those were important. And hydration for me was also a big thing. And I monitored several aspects of my stress, and it was like a little study that I did trying to figure out, what are the things that I can do that really impact stress without me having to think about it, right? And staying well rested and well fed and well hydrated. And three of those things.
It truly is that simple sometimes. Secret.
I think if you think about that, I mean, I look at that and I go, I always look at where's the similarity things, and I've always considered the human body to be really, it's the model for machines in the world. There's cooling systems, filtration systems. You need fuel, all these things that you need to have there. So when you talk about that, I mean, water is an important component. Water keeps, it's part of our cleansing filter is part of us being able to cool within everything, keep our body regulated and stuff of that nature. But to your point, sometimes, again, water is one of the things I know for years I was very poor at. I've gotten much better at that. Probably will never be as good as Patty on that.
But I haven't always been good at it. I made a significant change about 15 years ago, and it's been a good change for me. But when I get busy,
it's one of the easiest things to neglect. Something as simple as drinking water is one of the, what's the statistic? Like over 80% of the population is constantly dehydrated or something like that. And so, that shows just how easy it is to neglect that area.
Interesting.
Agreed.
And as we bounce towards the holidays, a lot of the stress can be counteracted if you take time to keep your healthy habits.
Absolutely.
Exercise is another one that I have gotten a lot of energy from over the years.
Developing those habits before the holidays and then sticking to them as best as you can. Also giving yourself some grace whenever we do have slip-ups. Because I think that's something we're so hard on ourselves. You're trying to stick to whatever nutrition plan, and over the holidays there's treats everywhere. People have treats and then they beat themselves up over it. You're adding to your stress.
Eat
the treats and move along. It'll be okay.
What happens to the brain, the body, when we spend time where we are beating ourselves up versus kind of just move on to the next thing, whether we did something wrong, whether we took that treat, whatever it may be?
You have to think about the script that you have for yourself in your head. And a lot of times the scripts that we have for ourselves in our heads, they're not actually our words. They're words that we have maybe been told for a long time, and we have adopted rather those words. And so I tell people sometimes, I'm like, write down those thoughts that you have about yourself and then read those things out loud. You would never say those things to another person. Why are you saying them to yourself? Right? It creates this negative narrative, and then you're less likely to take care of yourself because you're telling yourself that all of these negative things, and so you're telling yourself you're not worth taking care of. Right?
Yes.
Because you have all of this negative framework. Yeah.
Can see that.
Explore a little bit the impact that grief or trauma has on our holiday experience and why we may struggle, or some of us may struggle at times, to really get into that happy vibe that we think we should.
Sure, absolutely.
I think it's a big challenge.
It is. I talk to people a lot as they're navigating grief about, the hardest parts following grief. There's usually going to be 2 really hard days or 2 really hard periods of time, like every year as you grieve. And that's usually the birthday or anniversary of passing of the person, or the holidays, right? Those tend to always be a little more difficult because often when it's related to grief, we're focusing on the absence of that person, right? And so it's supposed to be, I'm using air quotes there, it's supposed to be this time of, family and unity and connection. And if that's not your reality, back to what you were saying about, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Why don't I have these things? And so that impacts our ability to be able to enjoy the holidays. A lot of people have a lot of dread leading up to the holidays, as much as it can be this happy, joyous, wonderful time. For a lot of people, it's not, because they're already starting to focus on their lack of what they're supposed to have. And when it comes to trauma, similar things, depending on the circumstances of the trauma, right? The holidays may be a reminder. Maybe you have to be around people that have caused you trauma.
Right.
And so that's another layer. It can be really difficult to navigate with people, because a lot of times people that are estranged from their families, they maybe only really see them at the holidays out of a sense of obligation.
Are there things that people who are triggered in some way by the holidays, either I'm missing a loved one, or I have to be around someone who caused me pain, or I remember that pain because of some holiday memory. Are there things that you can encourage people to keep in mind as they feel those things?
I often have we'll establish a game plan with the client, but leading into the holidays, because so many people really struggle through the holidays for all the reasons you mentioned. And so sometimes, and again, it's one of those, it depends on the person, but sometimes that strategy is, don't go visit your family. Right?
Can be.
Because sometimes we're only doing that for the other person, and it's causing ourselves all of this distress. Why are you doing it? What's going to happen if you don't? You might have a little more peace just by not.
It's possible.
And so sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's, we're going to go for a walk when things start to get heated, or when things start to get a little intense. Going for walks is a really, really simple but really effective coping skill that we can all implement whenever, and activate something called bilateral stimulation. So just the rhythm of your feet hitting the pavement, basically, it activates both sides of the brain. Which doesn't happen and really in any other situation outside of like REM sleep. And so both sides of your brain are firing at the same time. And so your full brain is activated and is able to deal with things a little bit better. And so
interesting.
I talk to people a lot about, go for a walk, no music, just be with your thoughts and let your brain process, let your full brain process that.
And
the dog will thank you as well.
Exactly. And it's some good physical movement. It's going to get some endorphins flowing, happy hormones. So,
I think about that throughout the years. I think we both have utilized that unknowingly because, going for long runs when times are stressful, things of that nature.
Absolutely. You'll often hear people describe running as therapy. And while I absolutely will not agree with that, running is a torture. I understand the science behind why people feel that way, because it can get very meditative and you're in your thoughts. So.
Yes.
You work through, I ran for many, many years and then ran into some physical injuries that have kept, it's better if I don't run. Occasionally I still do, but it is very settling. And
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons, I worked through a lot of things when I was gone.
Your brain's essentially in overdrive when that bilateral stimulation is activated. So
Interesting. So walking,
just going for a walk. Yeah,
it's great.
I had a new client come in last week, and we always ask about what tools do you already have in your toolbox, and a lot of times people don't have many. That's why they're there, and that's okay. But this person said that they really like to go for walks. They're like, I don't know what it is, but it just really calms me down. And so I was able to be like, well, there's actually some science there. So yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. It's like you said, a lot of people utilize that without even knowing the science and like why it's helpful, but it is.
Well, and in our podcast, we're focusing on building relationships and building community, but having self in a good place is critical to that, and having that be good for you.
Exactly.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to think about, if you are not in a great headspace, you're probably attracting people of a similar place in life, and so you might be building community, but once you are in a place that's a little bit healthier, you've done some work, you've done some healing, is that still going to be an effective social network for you, right? If those people have not also done the work that needs to happen. Versus, like we say, like hurt people attract hurt people, right? And so
so commiserating shouldn't be a way of life,
right?
Something that can help get through something, right? Not necessarily.
Yeah. And sometimes that's what we need, right?
Sometimes it is.
Sometimes that's what we need.
Yeah.
Usually long term, that's not a super effective strategy, because then you're just kind of sitting in it.
Yeah.
Versus taking the steps to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if we try to surround ourselves with a good group that are not necessarily always rah positive, but can be that sounding board of realism sometimes also.
Absolutely.
Would we benefit from that?
Yes. I'm a big advocate of, like, we're not going to be toxically positive, and everything is great all the time, and that's okay. Because also that idea of like everything's great all the time, it kind of shames you out of any time you have negative feelings.
Yeah.
And so we have to allow ourselves to feel those negative feelings. But I think the best people in your life are people who are going to challenge you, right, in ways that you need to be challenged, and not just go along with everything and agree with everything you say. And so the rah cheerleader, they can be your cheerleader when you need a cheerleader, but also not, super negative, who like they're not challenging you in any ways in terms of growth, right?
Yes.
We want to be challenged to grow. We should always be striving for growth. And so if the people in your life aren't doing that, they're maybe not super great for you.
Well, as we wrap up this episode, and you're going to come back because we're going to also explore how to navigate differences inside of the family holiday table, and what friendships and things like that can do to help us with that. But as we wrap up, what are some of the recommendations you'd have for our listeners about how to manage self and take care of self as they enter the holiday season?
I tell every single client, when we have that initial conversation about coping skills, you're here and you're doing a huge thing in terms of self-care.
Yeah.
And so, of course, this is my bias because I am a therapist, but I'll say, find a therapist if you don't have one. Like, get established with, that is one healthy support that you can have, that is there.
Yeah.
And so, one, I would say, go find a therapist.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I think, like I said, just checking in with yourself, asking yourself, after a long week, asking yourself, am I going to this dinner because I want to go to this dinner and this is going to be good for me? Or am I going because I feel obligated and I really am dreading it? And if you're dreading it, it's okay to decline.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, I don't have it in me.
Yes.
And that's another one of those things we feel like we can't. Oh, I committed to this. Depending on the situation, sometimes it's okay to say, I have to take care of me right now. I can't give to someone else.
I need a nap.
I need a nap. Thursday afternoons is my nap day. Thursday's my Friday, and so I'll always go home and take like a 2-hour nap.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just need a nap.
Yeah, sometimes you do.
Sometimes. I like
Thank
that.
you so much for being here with us
Thank
today.
you for
It's been
having
delightful
me.
to talk with you. We are so excited about the next episode where we explore differences and how we can come together better and what makes sense for us during that time. But I know you've given some great advice for how to keep your holidays something that is but at the very least manageable, but also more positive than sometimes it can be. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
It's great seeing you.
Yeah.
The 4 Bars podcast has been brought to you by Edges Inc., a growth advisory firm based in Bentonville, Arkansas. I founded the company in 2001.
Edges promotes growth of people, companies, and ideas. Our team collaboration tool, called Interface Methods, is a basis for teams to work together more collaboratively, understand each other, and accept differences and address challenges together.
We also started a nonprofit called Unform Your Bias. We teach kids and their adult influencers how to utilize storytelling as a means to reduce bias in the world. We hope you'll check us out, subscribe to our podcast, and look at our websites.